The afternoon sun was merciless, spilling heat across the cracked asphalt of Raymond's auto service. The garage doors were half open, buzzing with the hum of tired engines and the rhythm of metal against metal. Oil stains covered the floor like scars from 1,000 battles fought and lost. Inside, Ethan Walker, a thin, grease-covered mechanic in his late 30s, was bent over a rusted Chevy, sweat dripping down his forehead. He wasn't just fixing cars, he was fighting to keep his life from falling apart. His paycheck barely covered the rent for his small trailer outside town. His wife Leela had been sick for months, too weak to work, and their little boy, Tommy, needed new shoes for school. But Ethan never complained. He just showed up every day, 7 a.m. sharp, wearing that faded blue jumpsuit with his name patch stitched crookedly on the chest. "Walker," barked Mr. Grady, the owner of the shop, a stout man with a cigar permanently stuck to his lips. "That Chevy's gotta be done in 20. Customer's been waiting." "Yes, sir," Ethan muttered, tightening a bolt. "Almost done." Grady was the kind of boss who didn't believe in kindness. Every minute had a price, and every mistake cost you a day's pay. Ethan had learned long ago to keep his head down and his mouth shut. Just then, a faint cough echoed near the garage door. Ethan turned and saw a frail elderly woman standing by an old, sky-blue Bic, its front hood smoking faintly. She looked out of place, her floral dress fluttering in the wind, her thin hands clutching a small leather purse. Her hair was silver, pinned neatly in place, and her face wore that polite, hesitant expression of someone who didn't want to be a bother. "Excuse me, young man," she called softly. "I think my car gave up on me about a block away. It barely made it here." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "Ma'am, looks like she's overheated. You mind if I take a look?" "Oh please," she said, relief washing over her. "It's all I have. I can't afford a tow truck." Ethan popped the hood. Steam hissed out, followed by the smell of burnt coolant. He could tell right away. A blown radiator hose and a cracked thermostat housing. It wasn't a big job, but it wasn't cheap either. Mr. Grady noticed immediately, stumping out from his office. "What's this, Walker? We don't take walk-ins without a deposit." "She's just got a busted hose," Ethan said calmly. "Probably $30 in parts." Grady snorted. "Then she can pay for it. We ain't running a charity." The old woman's eyes dropped to the ground. I only have $10, she said quietly. "I was hoping it'd be enough just to get me home. My husband used to fix these things, but he passed last year." There was something in her voice that hit Ethan harder than he expected. It wasn't just sadness, it was dignity, the kind you don't often see anymore. He looked at Grady, then at the woman. "Don't worry, Mom," he said softly. "I'll take care of it." Grady squinted. "You'll take care of it? You mean she'll pay later?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir. I'll cover the parts myself. Just need a few minutes." Grady's face turned red. "You're kidding me. You're giving away company time for free." "She's stranded," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady. "It won't take long." Grady threw his cigar onto the ground and stomped it out. "Do whatever you want, Walker. But don't expect me to pay you for the hour." Ethan didn't care. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The old woman watched silently, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Ethan replaced the hose, filled the coolant, and made sure everything was tight and clean. He even polished the book's hood with an old rag, just a small gesture to make it shine again. When he was done, he smiled. "Try it now, Mom." The engine sputtered, then purred back to life. Tears welled in her eyes. "Oh, thank you. You don't know what this means. My daughter's expecting me for dinner. I haven't seen her in months." Ethan just nodded, wiping his hands. "You take care now. Roads can be tricky out there." She pressed the $10 bill into his palm, but he gently closed her hand around it. "Keep it," he said. "Buy yourself something nice for the drive." She blinked. "You're a good man, Mishy." "Walker," he replied with a shy grin. "Ethan Walker. Thank you, Mr. Walker. I won't forget this." She got into her car and drove off slowly, the book's engine humming steadily under the afternoon sun. Ethan watched her go, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. For once, he felt like he'd done something that mattered, but behind him he heard the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Grady stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You think you're some kind of hero," he growled. "You just cost this shop money." Ethan turned, still calm. "It was one hose, sir. I'll dock it from my pay." "Oh, you'll dock it, all right," Grady sneered. "In fact, you're done here." Ethan froze. "Sir, you heard me. Pack your tools. I don't need sentimental fools working for me. You're fired." The world seemed to stop. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his hands going cold. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Grady lit another cigar. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before playing charity boy on my clock." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to argue, to shout, but instead he nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." He walked to his workstation, picked up his worn-out toolbox, and stared at the greasy floor one last time. His co-workers looked away, too afraid to say anything. Outside, the heat hit him like a wall. He stood beside his old pickup, staring at the horizon, his future unraveling in front of him. All because he chose to help someone who couldn't pay. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove away. No job, no backup plan, no idea how he'd tell his wife. But as he drove, the memory of that old woman's smile lingered in his mind. Somehow deep down he knew he wouldn't regret it. Because sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. And sometimes it gives you more than you ever expected. The sun was sinking low when Ethan Walker's old pickup rattled up the dirt road leading to his trailer home. The fading orange light painted everything in tired shades of gold and rust. Dust trailed behind the truck like a ghost refusing to let go. Inside, Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles pale beneath the grime. The radio buzzed with static. He'd turned it on to drown out his thoughts, but nothing could quiet the echo of his boss's words. "You're fired." It didn't feel real yet. He'd spent years working under Grady, putting up with his shouting, his stingy pay, his temper, all because the job kept food on the table. And now it was gone. Just like that. When he pulled into the small clearing where his trailer sat, he took a deep breath. He could already see Tommy, his 8-year-old son, running around in the yard chasing a deflated soccer ball. Leela, his wife, was sitting on the porch with a blanket over her shoulders. She looked up when she heard the truck, smiling weakly. "Hey honey," she called. "You're home early." That simple line stabbed him right in the chest. He climbed out, forcing a smile. "Yeah, slow day at the shop." Tommy came running, his grin wide and bright. "Dad, you gotta see my kick. I made it all the way to the tree." Ethan crouched and ruffled his hair. "You did, huh? That's my champ." He played along for a few minutes, laughing and cheering until the light faded completely. Then he joined Lilo on the porch. The air was warm, filled with the smell of earth and pine. Fireflies blinked lazily near the trees. "You look tired," she said softly. "Rady working you too hard again?" Ethan hesitated. For a moment he thought about telling her the truth, how he'd been fired for showing a bit of kindness. But when he saw the way she leaned against the railing, thin and pale from the sickness that had stolen her strength, he couldn't do it. "Yeah," he said finally. "Same old Grady." She smiled faintly. "You always find a way through, Ethan. You always do." He nodded, though his throat felt tight. "Yeah, I'll figure something out." That night, after Tommy had gone to bed, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table. Bills were stacked neatly in a pile: electric, water, hospital, insurance, all stamped with red reminders. He stared at them until the numbers blurred together. He had maybe 2 weeks' worth of savings left. After that, nothing. He buried his face in his hands. "What am I gonna do?" Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm rolled in like a warning. The next morning Ethan was up before dawn. Sleep had been impossible. He drove into town with a stack of R.A. Sumes he'd printed months ago, back when he'd thought about leaving Grady's shop but never had the courage. He stopped at every garage he could find. Harlan's Auto, Joe's Repairs, Main Street Motors. But the story was the same everywhere. "Sorry, we're not hiring. Maybe in a few months." "You worked for Grady." "Yeah, we'll call you if something opens up." By noon Ethan sat in his truck outside a diner, staring blankly at his coffee. The waitress, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, noticed the grease on his hands and the exhaustion in his eyes. "You look like a man who's had a rough day," she said. He chuckled bitterly. "You could say that." She poured him a refill. "Coffee's on the house. Sometimes folks just need something warm to hold." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Thank you, ma'am. Don't mention it." She smiled. Kindness has a way of coming back around. He didn't realize how much those words would mean later. That evening when he returned home, Tommy was drawing pictures at the kitchen table. Stick figures of cars and people with big smiles. "Look, Dad," he said proudly. "This one's you fixing cars." Ethan smiled, but his chest ached. "That's a good one, buddy." Leela noticed the heaviness in his eyes. "You didn't find anything today, did you?" He shook his head. "Not yet, but I'll keep looking." She reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll be fine. We always are." He wanted to believe her. But that night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tap gently on the roof, wondering how long he could keep pretending everything was okay. 3 days later, the phone rang. It was Grady's number. Ethan hesitated before answering. "Hello. You think you can just leave my customers hanging?" Grady's voice was sharp. "That old lady you helped. She's been asking about you. Came back today looking for you personally." Ethan frowned. "She came back?" "Yeah. Says she wants to talk to you. I told her you don't work here anymore." She looked about ready to cry. Ethan's heart thumped. Did she say why? No idea. "But she left this." Grady paused, then added grudgingly, "An envelope. Has your name on it. Looks fancy." Ethan's pulse quickened. "I'll come get it." "Don't bother." Grady snapped. "I'll toss it in the mail." But Ethan was already grabbing his keys. He reached the shop within 20 minutes. The sky was still gray from the storm, and the air smelled like wet concrete. When he stepped inside, every mechanic stopped what they were doing. Even Grady looked startled to see him. "You're not supposed to be here," Grady said coldly. "I just want the envelope," Ethan replied. Grady grunted and pointed toward the counter. A white envelope sat there thick and sealed, with his name written in neat cursive, Mr. Ethan Walker. He picked it up carefully. For a moment, he thought it might be money. Maybe the old woman wanted to pay him back. But when he tore it open, a small gold card slipped out, along with a handwritten note. Dear Mr. Walker, I wanted to thank you again for helping me that day. I didn't have the means to pay you then, but I want you to know how much your kindness meant. You reminded me of my late husband. He always said the world needs more good men like you. If you ever find yourself in need, please contact my assistant. I insist. Sincerely, Margaret Ellison. Ethan's brows furrowed. The name sounded familiar. He flipped the gold card over. Embossed in elegant letters were the words Ellison Automotive Group. Corporate office, Margaret Ellison, CEO. His breath caught. He'd heard of the company before. One of the biggest auto chains in the state. They owned dozens of repair centers, dealerships and factories. The woman he'd helped wasn't just some customer. She was the owner of half the industry. Grady leaned over his shoulder, reading the name. His face went pale. Ellison, you mean that Ellison? Ethan nodded slowly, his heart pounding. Grady swallowed hard. Well, I didn't know she was somebody important. Ethan looked up at him, calm but firm. Didn't matter to me who she was. For the first time, Grady had nothing to say. Ethan slid the card into his pocket and turned toward the door. As he stepped out into the damp, gray afternoon, he didn't know what awaited him next. But something in his gut told him his life was about to change. And this time, not because of loss, but because of kindness finally finding its way back. The gold business card burned like fire in Ethan Walker's pocket the whole drive home. He kept reaching down to touch it, half convinced he'd imagined the whole thing. Margaret Ellison. The name still echoed in his head. She wasn't just anybody. She was the Margaret Ellison, founder and CEO of Ellison Automotive Group, one of the largest privately owned auto companies in the Midwest. Every mechanic in the state had heard of her. She was known for running a tight ship but also for her quiet philanthropy, funding scholarships, restoring old community centers, even supporting veterans programs. But Ethan, he had no idea that the old woman whose radiator hose he'd fixed for free was her. When he pulled into his driveway, the evening sky was painted in streaks of orange and rose. He turned off the engine, sat for a long moment, then finally went inside. Leela was standing at the stove stirring a pot of soup. The smell of onions and herbs filled the room. You're quiet, she said softly. Everything okay? Ethan hesitated, then smiled. Something strange happened today. He explained about the envelope, the card and the note. Leela listened, eyebrows raised, the spoon pausing midair. Margaret Ellison. The car lady who's always on the local news. That's the one. Leela set the spoon down slowly. Ethan, do you think she's offering you a job? He shrugged. I don't know. Maybe she just wanted to thank me. But she said, if you ever find yourself in need. Leela looked at him thoughtfully. You are in need, Ethan. He chuckled faintly. Yeah, I guess I am. She reached across the counter and took his hand. Then call her. What's the worst that can happen? He stared at the gold card one more time, the embossed logo catching the light. All right, he said finally. I'll call in the morning. The next day, Ethan woke before dawn, nerves twisting in his stomach. He dressed in his cleanest shirt, fixed himself a cup of black coffee and sat by the phone. He dialed the number. Ellison Automotive Group, this is Claire speaking. Good morning, he said awkwardly. My name's Ethan Walker. Ellison gave me her card. She said I could reach out to you. There was a pause, then a polite but surprised tone. Oh, Mr. Walker. Yes, Mrs. Ellison mentioned you might call. She's been expecting to hear from you. She has. Wes, sir. She'd like to meet with you. Are you available today? His heart skipped. Today? Yes, Mom. I can be there anytime. Wonderful. Her driver will pick you up in an hour. Please be ready. Before he could respond, she hung up. Ethan stared at the phone in disbelief. Exactly 1 hour later, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside his trailer. The contrast between the luxury vehicle and his modest home was almost embarrassing. He kissed Lilo on the forehead and promised he'd call soon, then stepped outside. The driver, a well-dressed man in a dark suit, greeted him with a nod. Mr. Walker? Yes, sir. Mrs. Ellison is expecting you. The ride to the city was quiet. Ethan watched fields roll into highways, highways into buildings, and buildings into towers. The Ellison headquarters stood tall and gleaming, glass, steel, and confidence. The kind of place he never imagined he'd walk into. Inside, the lobby was a world apart from the grease and grit of Grady's garage. The floors shone like mirrors, the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and people moved briskly in suits that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Mr. Walker, said a young woman at the reception desk, Mrs. Ellison is waiting for you upstairs. He followed her into a private elevator. His reflection stared back at him in the polished chrome walls, nervous, out of place, but determined. When the doors opened, he stepped into a spacious office overlooking the city skyline. And there she was. Margaret Ellison stood by the window, a cup of tea in her hand. She looked even smaller than he remembered, but there was something commanding about her, grace mixed with quiet authority. Mr. Walker, she said warmly. I'm so glad you came. He nodded respectfully. "Thank you for inviting me, ma'am," she smiled. "Please, call me Margaret." "Sit down." He did, careful not to scuff the pristine white carpet. "I wanted to see you because I've been thinking a lot about that day," she began. "Most people would have walked away, especially under someone like your former employer." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone should do." She studied him. "No, Mr. Walker. Most people don't. The world has become very transactional. But you," she paused, smiling faintly, "you acted from compassion. That's rare." He didn't know what to say. Margaret set her cup down. "Tell me, Ethan, what do you want to do with your life?" The question caught him off guard. "Honestly, ma'am, I just want to fix cars and make an honest living. Maybe one day have my own little shop." Her eyes twinkled. "Your own shop?" He nodded. "Nothing fancy. Just a place where people know they'll be treated right." Margaret leaned back in her chair, thoughtful. "You remind me of my husband, God rest his soul. He started this company with nothing but a small garage and a good heart." She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "I could use more men like him in my company." "And like you?" Ethan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I'd like to offer you a position," she said simply. "A managerial role at one of our local service branches. Good pay, benefits, opportunities for growth." Ethan blinked. "Ma'am, that's... I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," she said kindly. "You've earned it." He hesitated. "Why me? There are hundreds of trained mechanics out there." Margaret smiled gently. "Because skill can be taught, Mr. Walker. But kindness, that's character, and character builds trust. Trust builds business." For a moment, Ethan just sat there trying to take it all in. The woman he'd helped out of pure compassion was offering him a chance most men only dreamed of. He swallowed hard. "Then yes, ma'am, I accept." Margaret extended her hand. "Welcome to Ellison Automotive, Ethan." He shook it firmly, his chest tightening with emotion. As he left the office later, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across the city skyline. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, the world hadn't forgotten about people who tried to do the right thing. That evening he returned home with a quiet smile. Leela was waiting by the porch. "Well?" she asked, eyes wide. He held up a thin envelope with the Ellison logo. Inside was his job offer, 3 times his old pay, full benefits, and a note from Margaret that read, "For a man who fixes more than just cars." Leela covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Out by the road, the wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt real. Alive, and it had just begun to change everything. The following Monday, Ethan Walker stood outside the freshly painted building with a brand new Ellison Automotive sign gleaming overhead. His heart thumped against his chest as he stared at the bold blue letters. The building was larger than any garage he had ever worked in. Clean floors, organized workstations, and bright fluorescent lights that didn't flicker like dying fireflies. This was his new world. He adjusted his collar, still not quite used to wearing a clean uniform with his name neatly embroidered. No oil stains, no ripped sleeves, no smell of burnt rubber. Everything about this place felt different. Inside, several mechanics moved about checking cars and tools. A few glanced at him curiously. They'd been told a new manager was coming, but none of them had expected someone like Ethan. A quiet, humble man with a faded wedding band and calloused hands instead of a fancy degree. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward. "You must be Walker," he said. "I'm Dean, lead tech around here." Ethan nodded and extended a hand. "Good to meet you, Dean." Dean shook it, though his expression was cautious. "Heard Mrs. Ellison herself picked you. Must have made quite an impression." Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Just fixed her radiator hose." Dean raised an eyebrow. "That's one expensive hose then." The others chuckled softly, but Ethan didn't take offense. He'd been around enough shops to know how men tested newcomers, especially ones sent by the big bosses. He took a slow breath. "Listen, fellas," he said. "I'm not here to boss anyone around. I'm here to work with you. Fix cars. Make this place better for all of us." Ed earned a few nods, and the tension eased. Over the next few weeks, Ethan did exactly what he promised. He worked side by side with the crew, getting his hands dirty, staying late to help with complicated jobs, and never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He didn't act like a boss. He acted like a man who understood what it meant to struggle. Soon, people started noticing. Customers who used to dread service visits now left smiling. Mechanics who once grumbled about long shifts started joking again. The place felt alive, like a team instead of a business. One day, an older man brought in a broken-down truck that looked more rust than metal. The kind of job most shops turned away. "Don't waste your time," Dean muttered. "That thing's a graveyard." Ethan crouched to inspect it. The man, wearing a veteran's cap and a look of quiet shame, stood off to the side. "Just need it to run enough to get to the VA hospital," he said. "Can't afford much." Ethan nodded slowly. "We'll take care of it." The man looked confused. "You sure? I can pay something, just not today." Ethan smiled. "Don't worry about it, you've done your part for this country. Let us do ours. That night, Ethan stayed late with 2 volunteers from the team, and they patched up the truck with spare parts, replaced the battery, and even buffed the hood till it shone faintly under the shop lights. When the veteran came back the next morning, he stared at the truck like it was a miracle. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You fixed her, she runs again." Ethan just handed him the keys. "Drive safe, sir." The man saluted him before climbing in. Dean, watching from across the room, shook his head. "You're gonna make us broke with all this free charity." Ethan grinned. "Maybe, but you'll see, it always comes back somehow." And it did. Word started spreading through town about the honest shop, that didn't cheat customers, that treated everyone like family. Within a month, business doubled. Within 3, they had to hire 2 more mechanics just to keep up. The regional director from Ellison's corporate office came by for an inspection, expecting the usual routine check. Instead, he found customers waiting in line just to shake Ethan's hand. Margaret Ellison herself called later that week. "I hear you've turned one of our slowest locations into our busiest," she said. "How does it feel?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Feels good, ma'am. But it's not just me, it's the team. They're the heart of it." She paused, her voice warm. "You're a rare kind of leader, Mr. Walker. The kind people follow because they want to, not because they have to." Ethan smiled, humbled. "Thank you, ma'am. Just trying to do right by folks." Before hanging up, she added something that caught him off guard. "I have a new project in mind, Ethan. Something special. When the time comes, I'll need your help." The weeks rolled into months, and Ethan's life finally began to steady. Bills were paid on time, Leela's treatments improved her health, and Tommy, bright-eyed and full of curiosity, started spending weekends at the shop watching his dad work. One afternoon as they were cleaning up, Tommy asked, "Dad, why do you fix people's cars for free sometimes?" Ethan smiled, wiping grease from his hands. "Because sometimes people need help more than they need a bill, kiddo." But Tommy frowned thoughtfully. "But doesn't that make you lose money?" "Maybe a little," Ethan said, crouching to meet his son's eyes. "But you know what we gain?" Tommy shook his head. "Trust. And when people trust you, they come back. Not just for the cars, but because they know you care." Tommy nodded seriously as if trying to memorize that truth forever. But not everyone was happy with Ethan's rise. One evening after closing, Dean lingered behind, arms crossed. "Walker, can I be honest?" "Always," Ethan said, locking the tool cabinet. Dean sighed. "At first, I thought you were just another corporate puppet. But you proved me wrong. Still, not everyone upstairs likes the way you run things. They say you give away too many freebies, spend too much time talking to customers instead of pushing sales." Ethan leaned against the counter. "I figured that happened sooner or later." Dean frowned. "So what'll you do?" Ethan smiled. "The same thing I've always done, fix what's broken, help who I can. The rest'll sort itself out." Dean chuckled. "You're either the smartest or the craziest boss I've ever had." "Maybe both," Ethan said with a wink. A few days later, Ethan received another call from Margaret Ellison's office. "Mr. Walker," said her assistant, "Mrs. Ellison would like to see you again. She says it's about that special project she mentioned." Ethan's pulse quickened. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Her private residence." He hung up, staring at the phone. Something about the tone of her voice told him this meeting would change more than just his career. It might change his life. The morning air carried the soft hum of engines rolling into town. At first, no one paid much attention. After all, it wasn't unusual to hear cars passing by the old main street. But within minutes the sound grew louder, deeper, more powerful, not like the usual traffic. It was rhythmic, almost thunderous. One by one, engines lined the curb outside McKinley's auto shop, the place that had once been Mark's workplace. Within moments, dozens of luxury cars, from sleek Teslas to shiny black Cadillacs, parked neatly in front of the dusty old garage. People stepped out in suits, dresses, and uniforms. The whole town began to notice, and then came the woman. The old lady who had once driven that rusty Buick stood proudly in the front seat of a white Rolls-Royce, smiling warmly as she waved to the crowd. When the door opened, she stepped out, looking far more radiant than anyone remembered. Gone were the worn cardigans and patched skirts. In their place, a tailored beige coat, soft pearl earrings, and gentle dignity that spoke of quiet wealth. But her eyes, kind, warm, and twinkling, were exactly the same. "Where's Mark?" she asked softly. The crowd parted. Mark stood across the street, his hands greasy, a wrench still in his grip. He'd been repairing Mrs. Dobbin's old pickup, but now he froze, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Ma'am," he murmured. Her lips curved into a smile. "It's good to see you again, son." Everyone watched as she walked toward him, the Rolls-Royce driver following behind. A tall man in a suit, holding a thick envelope. "You probably don't remember much about that day," the old woman began, her voice trembling just slightly. "But I never forgot you. You didn't see me as a burden. You didn't treat me like some broke old lady wasting your time. You treated me like a person. And that," she paused, placing her wrinkled hand on his grease-streaked arm, "that means more than you could know." Mark shook his head slowly. Mom, I was just doing what anyone should have done. She chuckled softly. No, son. Not everyone would have done it. Not everyone did. Your boss didn't think much of it, did he? Mark looked away. No, ma'am. I lost my job because of it. The old woman's eyes softened. Then I suppose it's time we fix that. She turned to the suited man beside her. Monsieur Langston. He stepped forward, opening the envelope and handing Mark a letter. Mark hesitated before unfolding it. His eyes scanned the words and his breath caught. Notice of Employment and Partnership Agreement, Langston Automotive Restoration Division. He looked up, confused. I don't understand. The old woman smiled. You see, I'm not just an old lady with a broken book. My late husband founded Langston Motors, the company that makes half the parts you've probably repaired in your life. I've spent years looking for people who still value integrity over profit, who care more about people than receipts. That day you showed me exactly the kind of man I needed for my new foundation. The Mark blinked, speechless. You're not just being offered a job, son, she continued softly. You're being offered a partnership. To help run a new initiative to restore vehicles for low-income families, veterans, and the elderly. You'll have your own shop, your own team, and you'll never have to work under anyone who doesn't understand your heart again. The crowd broke into murmurs. Some clapped. Others simply stared in awe. Across the street, Mr. McKinley, Mark's former boss, stepped out of his office, his jaw clenched. The color drained from his face as he saw the elegant cars lined in front of his garage. The old lady noticed him and said, "I, the man who fired him, correct?" Mark tensed, but she simply smiled. "Don't worry, son. I'm not here for revenge. But maybe you'll remember. Sometimes it's the smallest act of kindness that builds the biggest engines of change." A McKinley looked down, humiliated. He had no words. Then the old woman turned back to Mark. "Now, what do you say? Ready to make something better than a paycheck?" Tears welled in Mark's eyes as he nodded. I don't even know what to say. "Thank you, ma'am. I never expected." She patted his shoulder. "That's exactly why you deserve it." She gestured behind her. A convoy of mechanics, engineers, and restoration experts began unloading equipment from the cars. High-end lifts, tools, and paint rigs. Within minutes, the sign above the old, abandoned shop across the street was being replaced. A new one went up, Mark's Garage. In partnership with Langston Foundation. The crowd cheered. For the first time in years, Mark smiled. A full, unguarded smile that came from deep within. He looked at his oil-stained hands, at the gleaming new sign, then at the woman who had trusted him without knowing who he was. And in that moment, everything came full circle. Because sometimes, the smallest good deed done with a pure heart travels farther than we can ever imagine. And finds its way back when we least expect it.